Welcome to the youth engagement session at this conference. As you know, we have a youth engagement session at every conference. And the idea is to have young people express their opinions, their ideas, their enthusiasm, their excitement, perhaps disappointments about what's happening in the sustainability space. Today, I'm joined by 4 students chosen from a fabulous class at the University of Notre Dame. The remainder of the class are in fact in the audience. These 4 students have been chosen to represent the class, to talk about some of the things that the class inspired them to do, but talk in general about the importance of sustainability in their lives. I have 4 students. I'll introduce them very briefly and then we'll start our chat. Robert Bektas. Robert is an economics major, sustainability minor. He has a keen interest in financial markets and sustainable investment, and he's concerned about wildlife, which he'll talk about later. Grace Brenneman, a major in strategic management. She's a leader in the Notre Dame swimming and diving teams. She was raised on a farm just 10 miles from here in Elkhart, Indiana. Chizoma Duru from Nigeria. Chizoma is an economics major with minors in sustainability and French. She's passionate about sustainability. She'll be representing Notre Dame in the A4S Accounting for Sustainability conference or competition in Toronto later this year. Libby Meister. Libby is a business honours student. She majors in strategic management and French with a minor in public policy. She is passionate about using business to further the common good. So let me start with you, Robert. Perhaps we could begin by you telling us why you got so passionate and so concerned about wildlife. What led you to those feelings?
So honestly, I'm not entirely sure the origin of how I got so interested in wildlife. I think it had to do with multiple things. I watched a lot of sort of like David Attenborough documentaries growing up, and I think I took that. When I watched that, I kind of got inspired to sort of go outside and look around me at some of the parks and wildlife in my area. So I think that had a lot to do with it, and it sort of inspired me to, as I said in class, go to those river cleanups with my family, and also write my paper in high school about ocean acidification.
So how do you see this influencing the next, we'll say, 5 to 10 years of your life?
Yeah, so I think after I went to Notre Dame and through taking this class, I think my sort of perspective on sustainability changed from just protecting the environment to also protecting the environment while sort of safeguarding and expanding on people's quality of life. So I think for the future, for me, I think I would want to go into some kind of renewable finance or some kind of consulting in the field of sustainability, and that would be focused on sort of going into communities and helping these communities be more sustainable, but also sort of helping them use sustainable energy to future-proof their places where they live and they work.
Awesome, inspiring. Grace. So Grace, I know you're a person of deep faith. How does that faith affect your life plan, particularly with respect to sustainability?
Yes, I would say my faith has given me a purpose and a passion and also a mission in all aspects of my life, especially with sustainability, as I've believed that sustainability isn't just a buzzword that we should use in business to do good things for the environment, but rather it's a calling that we get from God to care for the gift that He has given us, which is our planet. And in the future, I hope to combine my passion for agriculture and this calling of mine to make the land better for the future generations and make it better than I found it. And specifically caring for my environment, helping my family's farm be more sustainable in the future, and really just being an advocate for sustainability.
Awesome.
Kind of jumping in there, I'm from Missouri, so I feel like agriculture is really big in my state and to a lot of people that I care about. So I'd love to hear what you feel like new technologies are coming into the agriculture industry, or like where you kind of see this industry shifting towards sustainability, that'd be awesome.
Yes, I'm actually so excited to see how agriculture can be a leading force in solving the climate crisis and being more sustainable, as we're probably the most connected industry to the land, as we plant our food and, wait all year for harvest and really realize how the soil works, how everything fits together. And I'm so excited to see how we farmers can do a better job at, appreciating the land, appreciating the natural processes, and really getting back closer connected to the soil, and rather than misusing it and abusing it, which has happened in the past.
Terrific. I look forward to following the journey. Chizoma.
I think, Grace, you touched on very, very important points. I particularly connect with your point on faith. So like Dr. Easton rightly said, I'm from Nigeria. And being from Nigeria and coming to the US for school, I learned about climate change here. So of course we would talk about like global warming and like this overarching theme of like the fact that the ice caps are melting. But coming to school at Notre Dame helped me kind of connect that back to a lot of things that are pivotal to the Nigerian economy, like agriculture, like you all spoke of. We have a lot of small-scale farmers who are being affected by things like droughts and, like just the heat waves that we're continuing to experience year after year. So being able to draw those connections was so important to me. And I think it's not by mistake. I think it's very intentional that God puts me in a place like Notre Dame to learn from this in order to help solve the climate change issue through my major in economics and through economic policy formation and political or not-for-profit work in order to help Nigeria as a country and other countries similar to Nigeria on the African continent. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like, I agree that education is just so important, because I feel like if we are, as a generation going to make change in the sustainability space, there has to be some acceptance and knowledge at that individual level so that we can take it into our respective careers wherever they may be, whether it's business, agriculture, economics. I feel like it doesn't necessarily matter, right, what field you go into. It's more about what you do with your work there. And so it's kind of like not being afraid to hold the people ahead of you accountable in work. And so I think you have to kind of take some initiative in order to actually make the change as an employee too, not just as an individual in your personal life.
Absolutely. I'd also agree with you in realizing that in education, it's so important that we become educated in a wide array of industries and seek those thought leaders, seek those business leaders to make that aligned impact, because sustainability and also the climate crisis is such a complex issue that it requires like such a diversity of ideas to come up with unique perspectives and really ultimately help the world become a better place.
I think touching on this theme of education, I think it's important that we educate ourselves first and foremost, like we've done through taking classes like this or through seeking more education through conferences, media, and continuing to read about like sustainability issues. But we're not just educating ourselves for self-sake. We're educating ourselves to educate other people. So I think like there's so many things I've learned from being here, but there's also so many things I've been able to teach my friends that are here. I feel like there's a culture of consumerism in America sometimes, and being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to take that much in the dining hall because I want to reduce food waste. I'm going to compost my waste, but also being able to teach people that I'm not just doing this because I'm doing this because it has positive impacts on our environments. And I think education is a large gap in what I see in Nigeria concerning climate change. Not a lot of people know what's happening. And you can't blame them because there's so many other core developmental issues that Nigerians are going through. But I think they do have the right to know. They have the right to be concerned about their environment because it's so pivotal to our economy, to our well-being, to our health. And through educating them, you thus give them power to choose whether or not they want to enact sustainable policies, sustainable practices in order to help Nigeria as a whole, because this is not a singular fight. So we're not just educating ourselves for self-sake, but to educate others and to walk towards climate change prevention together.
Yeah, and kind of like it is so easy to, feel powerless, especially when you feel like, oh, this issue of climate change and sustainability is just so massive. Like, what can I do as an individual? And I think there's a lot you can do. And in order to actually make any change, you have to have hold yourself accountable to that knowledge, to that education, and to that learning. And I think, something that's really important is it's really difficult, when there's a ton of problems in the world to feel like to prioritize sustainability. When you're worried about putting food on the table, when you're worried about the economy, when you're worried about all of these issues, maybe recycling or other things kind of takes a back burner. And I think what we also really need to do in terms of education is not kind of thinking of these issues as separate, but kind of more of an integration of how we view the issues. Because, investing into things like education, research and development are good things for society, good things for our economy. And I think if we could start to kind of see how these issues relate to each other, we can better address them in ways that seem less overwhelming and actually applicable to your own personal life.
Can I change the topic a little? Excuse me. Chizoma, could you talk a little about funding? Where's the money going to come from?
I think that's a great question, Dr. Easton. I'm also looking for the answer to that question. But like we learned in this class, we had the opportunity, a group of students had the opportunity to read False Alarm by Lomborg, right? And that book largely talked about the monetary incentive or disincentive of pursuing certain climate change policies, right? And I think as someone who hopes to become an economist, get a PhD, do policy work, I have constantly been in classes where you think about, for anything to be championed through an economy, money is very important. So I hope to dedicate a lot of my life's work to seeking out nationally beneficial ways in terms of economy to promote climate change prevention policies. And in terms of the money, I think first and foremost, unlike some of the texts we read, people always say, okay, it's the West's job to kind of fund the global South in terms of climate change prevention, because there's an abundance of resources on this part of the world, and in developing economies, there's not that much of resources. But I think before that, it's the job of people like me, Nigerians or other country citizens that have the privilege of coming here and learning about such issues to champion that change, whether that's through, for example, if you're an engineering major doing work in terms of sustainable engineering, or an architecture major, an econ major, like Libby rightly said, it doesn't matter where you go into, but dedicating a certain amount of, a certain aspects of that career or the funding you earn from that career to take care of your country and the environment of your country. But also, I do think there is this responsibility for nations to help one another. Although it cannot be forced, I hope people are motivated to want to see everybody win in this fight against climate change. So I do hope Western countries or countries in the global North do see the benefits in investing in countries like Nigeria and helping us also win this fight against climate change because it's affecting all of us. So I hope we realize that this is a unified fight. Yeah.
And Robert, you mentioned kind of going into finance or consulting. What's kind of your perspective on using money, to kind of further?
Yeah, for sure. When I first came to Notre Dame, I actually wasn't originally an econ major. I was going to do global affairs and some intersection with sustainability, but that was one of the big reasons I switched majors. I thought, what motivates people to do things, what would incentivize people to be more sustainable, and it's if you make it cheaper and less expensive to be sustainable. And I also thought one of the ways that we could try to incentivize organizations or firms or governments to be more sustainable is to subsidize it and convince people that in the long term it will do, even in a purely selfish sake or just for money, in the long term it will be more profitable to be sustainable, because you need to evolve as climate change becomes more of a issue.
And through our discussions in this class, Robert, do you remain hopeful that sustainability will champion itself as like the most profitable option, maybe in like 10 or 15 years?
I definitely hope so, and hopefully I can play a part in helping that transition. But when growing up, I grew up outside the U.S., right? I grew up in the U.K., and I think from the rest of the world kind of looks at sustainability in a different way, just because the countries are a little bit less divided in terms of politics. But I would say, like, when I look at the U.S., I see like two different perspectives. I see, like, one hand, on the negative aspect, a lot of wastage. I see public transport. I see giant slow trains, and I see people driving cars on the highway for hours. So I see wastage, but I also see I have a lot of hope. Like, I have a lot of perspective on maybe how we can make the future better and how we can sort of improve on these kind of antiquated parts of the US. But overall, I'm hopeful, and I don't have a choice whether I'm hopeful or not. We have to do this. That's what we got to do.
I think it really starts with a shift in perspective, where you realize that it's not just, enjoying what we have and wasting a lot of it, which is an epidemic here in America, but shifting your perspective and seeing life in abundance and giving, just having so much thankfulness and gratefulness for what you have and using it well. So it's connecting gratefulness, but also stewardship at the same time, I think, is really the first step that we really need to make right now to really make some huge impacts in the future.
Yeah, and in terms of more like even just tangible things, that there's still like some pieces of the puzzle that I feel like really need to be completed in order to kind of see this change, especially, economically in terms of monetary policy. We talked a lot about how having a price on carbon is going to be like one of the most significant things for actually, holding organizations accountable to like their emissions. And I think that is like a piece of the puzzle that we need and need to advocate for, especially as young people, that, if we're to reach our goal of being carbon neutral at 2050, these are certain things that we'll need to advocate for, like the price on carbon. We really need to find a cheaper source of energy that's renewable, kind of reducing that green premium. And once we kind of start putting together and advocating for these pieces of the puzzle, and like you said, it starts with a mindset shift, that I feel like is what's really going to make that difference.
Libby, in class, you talked about the world we might see in 2050. Would you like to?
Yeah, definitely.
Make those observations?
I think I have to be optimistic and idealistic, especially as a young person. And I think in 2050, there's a lot of things that I would love to see. High-speed rail kind of as an alternative to, flying would be something that it's just a really cool idea. You were talking about the slow trains in America. I think that is a shift I'd like to see. I also feel like, we talk a lot about sustainability and accountability, but also the full range of ESG. I'd love to see more, like social and governance initiatives. We were talking about how America is so polarized. I'd love to see us kind of more uniting, not just as a country, but kind of as a global citizen, a global humanity, and kind of acknowledging your role in that, I think would something I'd love to see in 2050. And I really think that we can get there, as a global community, if we make that a priority. And so, yeah, I think those are some sort of the things. And we are going to be at like the height of our careers in 2050, which is really cool to think about. And kind of like the changes that we can implement then too, is fun to think about.
So you're nodding, Grace. Do you share this optimism?
I do. Specifically thinking about my future and what I would love to see in 2050 is just specifically having agriculture become more regenerative. One way that I think I want to do that in my future is to make my own family's farm more sustainable, and rather than supplying most of our beef to JBS and Tyson, which are monopolies in the meat processing industry, rather selling to local consumers and helping them learn where their food comes from, and ultimately help them be better connected to where their food comes from, ultimately building that community and a sustainable community, starting with local, semi-local, and ultimately it'd be amazing to see a huge cultural shift in the food industry in America by 2050.
Are you optimistic that will happen?
I am.
Terrific.
Grace, I think you've touched on something very important and something I've particularly learned this semester, the importance of agriculture in this journey towards sustainability. You know, Nigeria's main export is crude oil. So not very good when we talk about sustainability. And I think from even when I was younger, before I started getting into the nitty-gritties of economics, like I've always known that it is innately unsustainable for an economy to rely on one source because, you know, when we had the oil struggles last year, it really took a hit on the Nigerian economy. And then I look around so many times when I'm back home and I see how much space we have to grow so many beautiful agricultural, organic products that we could possibly export. And I think that's a big gap in terms of like something I hope to do, diversifying our economy to things that are more sustainable and not just relying on crude oil, especially as the world shifts from depending on fossil fuels to more renewable sources of energy, something that Robert hopes to venture into as well. But like how countries like Nigeria with so much space and arid land and land and just growable land can shift towards agriculture as a source of monetary value, as a source of economic value. And I wonder, growing up in a farm, basically, how have you seen agriculture contribute not just to your faith and not just to the environment, but like in terms of monetary value as well?
Absolutely. I think we will see a shift in agriculture in the future where farmers will be able to make money not just selling their products, like selling beef, selling corn, in all of those things, but also selling renewable energy. I think there's so much potential with agriculture to potentially utilize some of the waste that often doesn't get used to benefit in financial ways, or even just completing the circle of agriculture. Like God created the world to be united and in harmony with one another. And so rather than wasting certain elements and nutrients and even just leftovers in the agricultural circle, I think will be amazing for farmers to, you know, not just make money on their end product, but also make money on, you know, renewable energy or other side products that come with their main products in the end.
Yeah.
So,
and I was just going to say, like, it's so important to like realize, you know, it's like we have all of this beautiful land and space. We have enough food to feed the globe, but right, it's about allocating it in the right places and then making sure that that is renewed, you know, and so to continue for our future.
Absolutely. It requires a lot of accountability on every single person in the supply chain too, because it's not just farmers that are wasting.
Definitely.
A lot of farmers have some great products that they put their lives and souls into that ultimately get wasted because they don't get to the end consumer through transportation, shipping, and all of those kinds of things. So I think keeping the supply chain accountable is so important in the future to really make a sustainable impact in the agricultural and food industry.
Unfortunately, time is slipping away here, but I know each of you has some message that you would like to convey to the audience at this conference. There's a lot of people listening. Robert.
Okay. So, I mean, the first thing would just be optimism, which is kind of a theme of the class and the readings we were doing, just being optimistic and making sure that we're not overwhelmed by the size of the issue and that each person can, you know, make their own difference. And also the importance of perspective and understanding. Maybe some people don't have as much privilege to think about sustainability. So those are my messages. Thank you.
I would say my last message would have to be realizing that sustainability isn't just a buzzword or a good thing to do or think about, but it's really connected to who we are as a humankind, and really thinking about how am I using the gift that God's given me, a life in this planet, in all of those other blessings too.
I think my co-panelists have done a great job at addressing the general public, but I would want to address my message to specifically people that are watching this and are citizens or members of developing countries. It's not by mistake that you've gotten the opportunity to watch this right now. I think we all have a responsibility to help our countries and to take this education and educate ourselves even more to champion change wherever we come from. This is a unified fight. And I hope that you take what you learn here and you carry it on and you continue to raise soldiers against climate change to help the world receive the healing it needs. Yeah.
Yes, and I definitely just say, agreeing with everyone, right? As an individual, become educated as much as possible on the issues surrounding climate change, especially as they impact your life. And then also make sure to contribute to, as a generation or in your job, in your community, because fighting together is much more productive than fighting alone. And finally, if you're a student at the University of Notre Dame, make sure to take Accountability in a Sustainable World. It's been an excellent class.
Great way to finish. Thank you. That was, I think, truly inspirational. And I'm sure you, the audience, will agree. Thank you for listening.